Victoria Kwakwa, our East and Southern Africa Vice President. We'll have Indermit Gill, our Senior Vice President and Chief Economist of the World Bank. We'll have Ed Mountfield, who is our Vice President for Operations and Strategy. And last but not least, Michael Kramer again, who will join this panel from Chicago, Nobel Prize winner in economics since 2019. First, I would like to invite Victoria to give us an introduction, a little keynote to, as you have heard it this morning, place us on a good path of understanding why we're here and why this is so important. So Victoria, without further ado, please join us.
Thank you, Ariana, and good afternoon. It's good to see all of you again. I hope the morning session went well, and you're looking forward to this late afternoon discussion and the rest of the day, and indeed the rest of the week. For those of you in the room, some of what I'm going to say you would have heard this morning, but please bear with me because what I'm told is that this is now being made, it's live stream and several other people will be joining that aren't in this room. As Ariana has said, I'll just try really to set a bit of the context for this work, for this journey so far, and why we're doing what we're doing. I want to first of all thank Ariana and the DIME team, Indermit, Ariana, for really being steadfast partners on this work. And I'll say a little bit in my remarks, some of the journey that we've traveled together. But I think we really need to start this by situating everything that we're doing in the context of the development challenges that Eastern and Southern Africa faces. And that gives us a sense of the enormity of a development challenge and why we need to do things differently to accelerate support to clients as they face these challenges. So this morning you heard me say that, for example, if you take electricity access, there's still about 50% of citizens in the region that don't have access. So you're talking about over 300 million, 365 million Eastern and Southern Africans who don't have electricity. We know that close to 600 million or 585 million people don't have access to clean cooking. This is a burden, particularly for women and for girl children. And I also did say that the gap in access to clean water and proper sanitation is not closing in the region. On the contrary, it's widening to the extent that you have, in absolute numbers, more people in the region without access to clean water, without access to proper sanitation than there was 20 years ago. Clearly, that's not acceptable. So these are some of what we're faced with. If you look at food security, if you take the continent as a whole, there's about 270 million people that face chronic hunger, particularly in some of the conflict areas. And then in Eastern and Southern Africa, we have about 75 million people that are acutely hungry. If we talk about education, we know that about 89% of children are learning poor. That basically means that they're not acquiring the foundational skills and the foundational literacy that will allow them to learn effectively going forward. We see about 1 in 3 girls not in secondary school because of early marriage, teenage pregnancy, and so on. So these are major challenges. I could go on and on and on. And this morning, I want to say what I said again this morning, that it doesn't mean African countries or countries in Eastern and Southern Africa haven't made any progress. That would be a lie. These countries have made progress, but progress is not sufficient to keep up with the scale of the challenge. And so our setting is, how can we accelerate development progress? How can we do stuff that is more impactful and helps countries move the needle on these and other challenges? So that's one. And then in contrast, we also saw in the same vein that if you look at our IEG evaluations of projects that are completed, that are financed by the World Bank, you had only 30% that was rated satisfactory or better. You know, of course, the majority are moderately satisfactory, but I don't want to be talking about moderately satisfactory, because I think we should challenge ourselves and be looking at something better than just moderately satisfactory. And so what we had said as a leadership team, this was over a year and a half ago, that we wanted to flip this to 70% of projects that we finance being rated at the end in terms of the achievements being satisfactory or better. So going from 30 to 70. And so this we knew would stretch us. And we decided right away, we had a small team work on it with ASME, and decided we needed to really look at monitoring and evaluation and how we bring this into the work. And then we had a chance to link up with DIME. Ariana and Indermit invited us to a workshop in Oslo. And there I was just blown away by hearing some of the work that DIME was doing and the impacts and the results that were coming out of it. And I was just so ashamed, because I'd been in this institution how many years? And this is work that had been going on over 15 years, and I wasn't even aware of some of it. And so we decided, that's when we started this partnership, that we would really work together with DIME to see how we can bring evidence, learning, impact evaluation through that to our work and help us reverse what we were seeing. And so for us as a region, we decided we start with setting our strategic priorities, because if you really want to be impactful and have better results, you can't be doing everything. And the results, the challenges are everywhere. But we decided on a few key priorities. We picked energy, access, for the reason, and I've given you the numbers, and put in place a program that with the existing portfolio should provide access to 150 million people in the region by 2030. And then we also picked water and sanitation for the reason that I've mentioned, and there also try and get about 100 million people access by 2030. We picked the digital agenda, and I didn't give any numbers on that, but also really important as an enabler of service delivery, of jobs, of growth, of everything. And then we picked basically to provide access, but more use, get more people accessing and using digital services. And then we picked education, because coming out of the COVID, we also realized that countries had taken a hit. Children weren't learning, so really to cut learning poverty by about 2/3, and also really work on getting teenage girls to get into secondary school and stay in school. You know, I'm sure you'll say, but what about climate? Yes, and the region has so many climate shocks. We're seeing it as the droughts, as the floods, it's everything together. And that cuts across our work. You know, it has to be so much embedded in everything we do. We're not forgetting that. And of course, the gender that we talked about a bit this morning. So we set up these goals. And we also realized that we had to move from boutique one-off projects, which are nice. Maybe they help 100,000, 200,000 people, 40,000. But given the size of the problem, it didn't really make a perceptible difference. And so we wanted to have this impact at scale. So we needed more programmatic approaches over a period of time that would help us get there, supported, of course, with the learning, the evidence, the impact evaluation, and the emphasis on monitoring that would be really important. So this is where we've come from. And, you know, of course, this is all very much aligned and in sync with the evolution process that we're going through, which at the heart of it is really about results and bigger impact. You know, we decided that in several of the areas, we also needed to work with others, particularly the private sector, to leverage more resources because the public resources simply aren't enough. And we need to work in new partnerships. All of this is really at the heart of the evolution roadmap. So this is a little bit, and I've said it very quickly, but I just wanted to situate the conversation that's going to go on and what motivated us, a sense that we needed to do much, much better. We needed to be clear on our strategic priorities, set bold targets, and really bring the learning, the evidence, and adapting and scaling to what we do. This is essentially what we're launching here this week, and you're all part of it. I said this morning, it's not about the bank, it's not about me or my leadership team, it's about all of you. It's about the clients, because the bank can't do this alone. And it's about building all of our capacities on the bank side, on the client side, and working together, learning the lessons, correcting mistakes, adapting as we go along. So I'm really excited to be here today with all of you. I'm excited about the journey we've traveled, but what lies ahead. And it's not easy. We'll have to continue, and we all have to really embrace this new way of working so that we are able to really accelerate development progress in Eastern and Southern Africa. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Victoria. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Victoria, for your inspiration and most of all for your leadership. You have inspired us all to move very, very ambitiously towards a much larger program to really affect the quality of the portfolio and moving it forward together. So we have great hopes. We have here Ed, and I'd like to bring Ed into the conversation. Ed has been part and parcel of the evolution roadmap, the setting of a great reform program that will take the bank not only to be bigger, but better. And I like Ed to tell us a little bit about that process from the center. Tell us what the evolution roadmap is all about and how it fits within this new agenda for us to be much better at what we do, scaling up what works and avoiding the errors of the past.
So thanks, Ariana. Great to be here, and I hope you can all hear me. Let me know if you can't. So the World Bank Group's evolution process is about recognizing that the world is changing rapidly and countries are facing complex, new and accelerating challenges, both domestic and global. And in Africa, of course, as Victoria explained so well in her remarks just now, these are particularly acute existential threats like rising hunger, water scarcity, climate change, pandemic risks, biodiversity loss, but also huge transitions like how do we get energy access and digital connectivity to people in Africa. And all of this, of course, too often in the context of growing fragility and conflict and debt distress. So in this context, as Victoria said so well, we can't afford business as usual. Our work with our member countries and our partners needs to be bolder, it needs to be better, and it needs to be bigger. So we've agreed with our shareholders an expanded new vision as part of our evolution, not just to end poverty, but to end poverty on a livable planet. And we've agreed with our shareholders a new World Bank Group scorecard with 22 key results indicators we think we need to work with our member countries to achieve if we're to make real progress towards our vision. So things like millions of more people benefiting from social safety net programs, better education, quality health, nutrition and population services, millions of people with enhanced resilience to climate risks, millions of people with strengthened food and nutrition security and provided with water, sanitation and hygiene and so on. So Victoria again said, it's not that we haven't made progress, we have made progress, but often not good enough progress and certainly not fast enough at bigger enough scale. So to dramatically accelerate progress towards these goals, we need to work differently. We need to be a bigger bank. So we're working to optimize our balance sheet and do more to mobilize public and private resources and work better in partnership with other development actors and make the case, of course, also for new resources, including through the upcoming IDA 21 replenishment this December. But we also need to be a better bank. So we're developing a new playbook for how we can achieve greater impact faster and at bigger scale. There are many elements of this new playbook and about how we're working to become a better bank. I won't dwell on them all, but a very important part of becoming a better bank that I'll focus on is about connecting the knowledge side of the World Bank and the operations side of the World Bank, which of course has been a major focus throughout their careers for you, Ariana, and of course Indamit as well, who I see on my screen, and the rest of us are finally catching up. And a central part of this playbook is our new knowledge compact. This is about generating stronger alignment with the global challenges in our strategy and our knowledge work at country level. So it includes an updated suite of core country analytical products that will underpin how we engage with client countries, from our new country climate and development reports to new jobs and growth assessments and other elements. Part of it is about being more outward looking and supporting clients more systematically with training, with data collection, curation, analysis and dissemination. And a key element I want to emphasize is data. Improved country data capacity is absolutely central to our efforts on evidence. The World Bank is stepping up efforts to support countries to build their statistical capacity and enhance the ability, the availability and the quality of household surveys, particularly in IDA countries where the data we work on is frankly a long way from where we need it to be. And the information generated through these surveys plays such an important role in understanding the challenges that people face. We need to see data and knowledge as a joint responsibility. And ultimately, we want to use the knowledge to better design programs that embed impact evaluation in them and that strengthen the learning loops and improve our operations and our development impact. So a big part of the evolution is about moving from retail to wholesale, or in other words, recognizing that development can't just be an endless series of innovative pilots. If we're going to get to scale and we're going to really move the needle on the 22 priorities set out in our new scorecard, we need to identify things that work. If we don't know, we need to work it out quickly, and then we need to replicate and scale successes. An important part of how we plan to get that done is the introduction of new global challenge programs, as we're calling them, a series of regionally and globally coordinated programs that will allow us to better help clients learn what works and pursue replicable and scalable approaches with the World Bank knowledge and financing that underpins these programs coming together. And working closely with clients and shareholders, we're piloting 6 global challenge programs, including energy access and transition, food and nutrition security, accelerating digitization, water security, sustainable forest economies, and health emergency prevention and preparedness. And these GCPs will use simple but powerful solutions and interventions to reflect country circumstances, but be replicable and scalable at the global level, and to help us deliver at speed. And building strong analytical underpinnings and implementation lessons will allow us to incorporate this into future engagements. So these are going to be, in many cases, frontier challenges in new areas like digitization. Impact evaluation will be systematically embedded so we can identify what works and we can scale effective solutions. And it will also enable us, importantly, to build client capacity for impact evaluation and better monitoring and evaluation. Before I close, let me just say that much of the challenge is to help our operations teams and clients get much better at putting evidence into use, and welcoming impact evaluation as part of program design is a key element of that. But there's also a need sometimes for our knowledge teams to get better at partnering from their end too, and making sure that their research is relevant to the needs of our clients and our institutional priorities. So making sure that we do impact evaluation on things that we want to replicate and scale, and not just on innovative small scale experiments that make good papers in journals, or maybe a donor with a trust fund wants to pay for it, but it doesn't always answer the question being asked by practitioners. So this is about coming together around a common agenda, and I think the Africa Leads initiative really exemplifies a best practice in that regard. So we need to scale these approaches. We need to collaborate closely with each other around the world and with external stakeholders also, and to learn from each other and from our clients, and help build much more evidence about what works and put it to work in our operations. So look forward very much to hearing from others and continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Ed. You gave us a lot to think about. I'd like to ask Victoria. So the evolution roadmap was conceived in DC at headquarters, with big global challenge programs being put forth with a huge emphasis on partnerships and new financing. And I just want to hear your opinion or your sense of how do we resolve the tension between global programs and regional priorities and country priorities. How do you think about this challenge of ensuring that, as Ed said, we are relevant, we do the relevant work for each country and each project, but also we contribute to the global agenda and moving that forward.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Ariana. Look, I think the sense that you have tensions, or there could be tensions, is really, I've not seen that in practice. Maybe in theory, the tensions are there. In reality, I think the way that these global programs are being put together, with the global teams working very closely with regional and specific teams, really reduces these tensions and mitigates any risks that you get a top-down global program that doesn't speak to the needs of the regions or to the needs of countries. On the contrary, you see that if you, as Ed mentioned, quite a few of the advantages, the global learning, bringing global lessons to countries, solving things at scale, and working together really to solve some of the problems. I think the advantage of the global programs is that you can say globally, what is the impact we're having? And we want to be able to have that global impact, and you need that. But at the same time, I think that it's very much seeped in what's happening in the regions and the countries. If I take the Energy Global Program, for example, if you look at it, there are different elements. There's elements of access, electricity access, which is very relevant for Africa. And then you have energy efficiency, which ECA is really Europe and Central Asia. For them, that's a big thing for them. And then you have energy transition, which brings in priorities for regions like South and East Asia. So it captures the different priorities, the priorities of the different regions. And then if you talk about the regional and the country, if you take our MPA, which is part of the energy program, the Ascent, it has a menu of possible activities and investments which reflect what the different countries need and where the different countries are at in terms of achieving improved energy access. So I think that in developing these global programs, we're really connecting the global and the regional, and within the regional, we're connecting the country to, so it's very much seeped in teams working together. And I think if we keep it that way, then I'm not worried about any tensions really materializing. And we maximize the upside of having such an umbrella program that brings everybody under the tent. We learn from each other, we solve problems together, and we facilitate countries learning globally what the experience has been.
Yeah, from our learning perspective, we actually thought the movement towards programmatic approaches, multi-phase, was Absolutely excellent. It gives us the opportunity to think about the early comers in these programs and what we can learn from those countries, and then communicate with the rest of the countries and really kind of move a whole agenda forward in the different areas of work. So that's been really a wonderful experience so far, and we are really looking forward to continue working with all the projects, but the MPAs feel like the right setting for this learning agenda. I want to bring back on the knowledge side, our own chief economist in the MIT. You have placed, Victoria, some very big challenges for the Africa region. And of course, those are big numbers with big dollar bills attached to each number. And so I'd like to bring Intermit into this discussion to ask him about kind of the global economic situation and how do we kind of add up, how do we balance out the challenges ahead and the financial requirements of these challenges together with the fiscal situation and the growth and global growth. What are the things that we should be thinking about in the mid?
Ariana, so actually Ed and Victoria have really laid out the big issues very well. And I'd rather listen to Michael rather than talk, but I will try to answer your question very, very quickly. So the first one is, I think the big implication, Ariana, is that money is short and is going to get shorter. It's not going to get more abundant because it is likely that interest rates are going to remain high. It's likely that the cost of borrowing for the poorer countries, for everybody actually, is going to remain high. Now, the second thing that is that we also see both from a global perspective, but also from an Africa East and Africa West perspective, especially, is that the needs are great. There are huge education deficits, there are big health deficits, there are huge public infrastructure deficits, and so on. Now, and the thing that we find is that the poorest countries in the world, especially the 75 countries that are eligible for assistance under IDA, they are actually slipping. So, for example, we actually have found that their growth rates are lower. They are more likely to suffer bigger damages from climate shocks as compared with other developing economies. And they are more likely to actually suffer bigger damages from climate shocks today than they did a decade ago, right? So all of these things. So Africa in particular has not done well, Victoria. I know that you know these statistics, but in a sense that the thing that we are concerned about most about Africa is that there has not been much per capita income growth in the region as a whole. And the thing that we are also sort of worried about is that all of the prospects for the next decade are not much better. So imagine losing 1 decade, that's bad. Imagine losing 2 decades, that's a disaster. Okay. All right. So for all of these reasons, we think that these countries ought to do better, but mainly we think that the World Bank ought to do better, right? And so I know that we've tried to help a lot, especially during COVID, but also after. And in some sense, I guess in some ways we have succeeded, Ariana. But I think that basically what we've succeeded in is being a little faster in terms of providing budget support. Okay. Now we have actually tilted our support in a sense towards faster dispersing loans and things like that, which was the need of the hour, right? But you can easily overdo this. And when you overdo it, what happens is that you end up financing public consumption instead of financing public investment. And when you do that, you don't actually increase the growth prospects of these countries. You only add to their debt. So at the same time that you're adding to their debt, you're actually not improving their growth prospects. In a sense, what you're doing is that you are worsening the problem rather than helping it if you overdo it. I don't think we've overdone it, but the best way to not overdo it is to focus more on investment projects. Investment projects are called that because they finance investment. They always do, right? So then you sort of say, okay, how do you become a better World Bank? How do you actually do better investment projects? So when I came to DEC, I actually talked with Ariana's group and I asked them, so what have you guys learned over the last 20 years that you've been sort of looking at these projects, investment projects and so on? What have you guys learned? And I thought they would tell me, well, we learned, here's how to do a health project better. We've learned from Michael's work and other work and so on. We've actually done our own evaluations. We know how to do education better like this, etc. Actually, what I learned from them was much more important, much more revolutionary, right? So the first thing that I learned was that out of all of the groups in the Development Economics Vice Presidency, this group, the Development Impact Group, was actually working a lot on FCV countries, the poorest countries, the most fragile countries, and so on. So they were actually taking on the biggest development challenges and saying, how can we spend our money better? How can we help these countries spend their money better, right? So that was the first thing. So I saw that they had actually gathered a lot of expertise. I also found that actually people like Victoria, people like Usman and Martin wanted to put this expertise to good use. And this workshop is one of the key initiatives where we are actually trying to sort of do this. So what have I learned from them? Okay. So I've learned three things from them. The first one is that as economists, we tend, when we look for high return projects, what we tend to do is we try to sort of look at the sectors. So is health a higher return investment for this country? Or is education a higher return for this country? Or are rural roads a thing? So we try to sort of line up the rates of returns to these projects by these sectors. The other thing that we do is that we look at countries. We say which country has good implementation capacity, which has good governance, and so on. We should finance, we should try to finance projects in those countries, right? What I've learned from them is that's just wrong. That's the wrong way to look at it, because the sector and the country part actually is dominated by the design and the implementation part of the project. So if you look at, you can actually, you can improve the design of a health project and get much higher rates of returns, and much higher that you actually get much more variation in the rates of returns by the quality of the design and the quality of the implementation, rather than looking at education versus health versus rural roads. A well implemented health project is actually far more likely to have development impact than a poorly thing. And the main difference between a well implemented project and a poorly implemented dwarfs those differences between sectors or between countries. That's the first thing that I learned from them. The second thing that I learned from them is that given the fact that design and implementation are so important, the way that we do evaluations is outdated, in the sense that we think of evaluations as coming at the end of a project. And the thing that I've learned from them is that's just a very wasteful, and that is a very outdated way of doing it, because what you really want to do is make sure that the design and the implementation of a project, the one that you're implementing right now, not the next one or the one after, this one has to be improved as you're implementing it. Okay. So that's the second thing that I've learned from them, is you have to bring the evaluation component up towards the start of a project. Now, that's not easy, because it requires management systems, it requires data, it requires incorporating that data into changes in the design of that project and so on. But there is no alternative. If you want to use this money well, you should actually do it exactly the way that is. You don't want to wait until the end of a cycle. That's an outdated way of thinking. That's the second thing that I learned. The third thing that I've learned from them is that we've actually done pretty well in learning what doesn't work and not repeating that. Okay. And we're actually not very good at learning what works and then repeating it and scaling it up. Okay, we tend to move on from successes very, very quickly, just like we move on from failures. We say, okay, we won't repeat this, but we don't repeat our successes either, right? And those successes, given the fact that it's not the country that matters, it's not the sector that matters nearly as much, but the design of the project that matters, that's a prima facie case for learning across countries. So this workshop, I really love the idea of the workshop where you bring people from across sectors, across countries and so on, and say, we will work together to see how to improve the design and the implementation of these projects. It doesn't matter whether it's an education project or a health project or a transport project, whatever it is. What matters much more is how you design these things. Okay? I've talked too long. Thank you very much. But that's the sum total of what I wanted to say. There's not much more. I'd rather now listen to Michael.
Thank you, Indermit. Michael, you heard Indermit. You are called to answer. The first thing, perhaps, is this notion that we need to invest in the right thing. And you have done quite a bit of work in understanding what is the bottom line in investing in knowledge. Does it have a good return or not? And then you talked to us yesterday quite a bit about kind of a life cycle of learning, a long-term learning agenda that really gets us somewhere and helps us scale things that work. Can you just enlighten us a little on these two questions?
Sure. Thanks very much. Let me start out by just saying that I very much agree with the points made by Indermit. I think there's a lot of just tremendous heterogeneity in returns to projects within sector, within country, and there's a lot that, and in some ways that's very good news because even in very difficult environments, it is possible to make tremendous progress. I also agree very much that we should think about evaluation not just at the end of a project. Yes, this project was good. No, this project was bad. But rather, we should think about it the same way that tech companies do when they do A/B tests. They're constantly doing A/B tests. They're constantly looking for ways to improve their products. And I think we need that cycle of continuous improvement, and that should be built in from the beginning. And with piloting, whether or not they're formal experimental randomized controlled trials or not, but simply piloting, and then perhaps with randomized controlled trials, other approaches to measure impact quantitatively and assess causality later on. And I finally agree that a real challenge for development is we found a lot of things that have not had the impact we hoped for, but there are many things that have had tremendous impact. And I think there are cases where the World Bank or other multilateral institutions have played a tremendous role in helping scale these up. To start with, if I think about value-added taxes, for example, my understanding is these were for those of us who are the older people here, these were not always so common, and the IMF played a key role working, and I'm sure the bank as well, in working with many countries to help implement them. And this may be most relevant for well, there are many countries where I don't want to make a judgment on their relevance for Africa, but conditional cash transfers. If you think about what the Inter-American Development Bank and the World Bank did on this area, this is something that has scaled up with tremendous assistance from multilateral development banks and is now an important part of policy in many countries. So I think there are positive examples, but I think we need many more of them. There are many other cases where this hasn't happened. But to address your question, Ariana, you were asking about the return to innovation, and as I discussed a bit yesterday, I was involved in a systematic effort to institutionalize innovation within called Development Innovation Ventures at USAID, and continue to be involved with it. Development Innovation Ventures gives small grants for piloting new ideas, but then, and this tries to be open across, in part for the reason that Intermit suggested, that there's opportunities in many different sectors. We try to be open across sectors, across countries, but then we ask for real evidence of impact and cost effectiveness before we put in larger amounts of funding. And that's typically, although not always, from randomized controlled trials. And you know, then that's designed to discipline our funding decisions. And we're funding innovation, so we want to take risks, but we want to limit the downside of those risks and not throw good money after bad. So we analyzed our portfolio, and as I mentioned yesterday, we looked at our 2010 through 12 portfolio. On the one hand, we set the entire cost of the portfolio as our cost side, and then for the benefit side, we weren't able to quantify all of the benefits, but we took of the projects that reached over 1 million people, we looked at those which and our expenditure was, I think, $16 million over that period. We were very small at the beginning. We're still very small by World Bank standards, but we then looked at the benefits that we could quantify and express in monetary terms. Not all of our projects could be expressed in monetary terms, but just 5 projects had a benefit of over $280 million, so a 17-to-1 benefit cost ratio, even setting aside many of our benefits. So I think that suggests that it is possible this evidence-based approach can yield very, very high returns, and investing in innovation, in particular investing in innovation with this approach. That does, of course, depend on the innovation scaling. And we tried to look at what the correlates were of innovation scaling, and we saw some patterns in the data, which I'd be happy to talk about. But I think let me go to a particular example just to make things a little bit more concrete, not from DIV, but on this point that Intermit was making about the opportunity to implement at scale and to learn from success. One issue that I've been doing work on in multiple countries is digital agriculture. Victoria mentioned that digitization is one of the key priorities, and across multiple studies, there's evidence that farmers in Kenya and Rwanda, in other parts of the world as well, that farmers respond to digital messages and quite high estimates of benefit cost ratios from this. It's now one thing that was particularly important for farmers in a context of climate change is weather information. Weather patterns are changing. Farmers need to be able to respond to that in their agriculture decisions. There's big advances in weather prediction technology, partly with just development of the traditional physics-based models, partly new development of artificial intelligence-based models. It's now possible to send those messages to farmers on their phone. Again, multiple studies from multiple parts of the world, including in Africa, suggesting that farmers really respond to those, and estimates, both experimental and non-experimental studies, suggesting very high returns to doing so. This is something that where it makes sense to think about trying to transmit this information across multiple countries. And there's definitely an opportunity for one country to learn from another. How do you design the messages? How do you build up credibility of the messages? Do you give agricultural advice along with the messages, or do you just provide the message, the weather forecasts themselves? This is the sort of thing that I think could be scaled across multiple African countries. I'm not a weather forecasting expert. I'm sure there's going to be lots of, there's some things where more data would be needed. I don't want to minimize the need for additional weather stations and so on, but there's some information that can be provided now with existing technology. So that's an example of something that I think could be scaled up. There are many others.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. In fact, I think this whole new area of innovative data connected to our portfolio of interventions, so we combine the information together with action, can be quite transformational. And relatively at low cost, we can solve big problems that we were not really able to solve before. And the weather forecasting is just one of those ideas, but the forecasting of food security, conflict, and connecting to agencies that can actually prevent and or respond to major events has been proven in our work to facilitate action, preventative action, including anticipatory transfers, but also connecting to the deployment of agent to areas being deforested and catching people literally doing it while they're doing it and being able to capture and stop things as they happen. Now, I thank you, Michael, for the 17-to-1 returns to investment in knowledge. This is an important numbers. I should say that we too did an assessment of the returns to investment in impact evaluation for the period 2014 to 2020. And we came up with a number which said that we can double the impact of our programs. What does that mean? So we work with program at scale, very large programs, put a very small resources into the data and experimentation during the implementation phase. And by doubling the impact, in essence, we are doubling the resource envelope for each project. Now, this is big. However, there is kind of a long-standing, how to call it, a little bit of reservation in financing knowledge generation. Everybody feels very comfortable financing the road or the highway, but somehow financing the knowledge attached to it seem, always too expensive. And so the question is, what is too expensive when the results become much larger and we can actually move forward with a certain level of confidence that we not only are doing the right thing, but we are avoiding these errors of the past and really maximizing the impact of our program. So I want to bring back both Ed and Victoria on this question. And how do you see it moving forward? Oh, we are taking it to Ed first. We are putting you on the hot seat.
So I think the direction that Victoria set out and that you're setting out is exactly the direction we need to travel. We need to invest more in impact evaluation because it has a huge rate of return, as you are proving. And I think for that reason we need to scale it up. I think that we do need to continue the conversation about how we design impact evaluation and how we try to use it. And I agree with Indamit and with Michael that it's important that we think about how we use impact evaluation as part of the not just to evaluate the end of a project, but also as a way of improving implementation during implementation. But I also feel that we need to also consider how we can learn across countries and across projects, because I don't know that it's realistic immediately that we're going to be having impact evaluation in every single one of our projects. And so being able to learn lessons that we can carry from one country to another and from one project to another has to be important as well. And then I think I would also just a little bit nuance what Indamit said about how basically that countries don't matter, and that it's really about the design of the project and the implementation of the project. And of course, that's absolutely true, that there are examples of really successful projects in really difficult and low capacity countries. But those are often achieved through very, very hands-on support from development partners and from outside researchers in some cases where there's impact evaluation involved. And so I do think that thinking about how can you build that capacity at country level, and how can you think about designing projects in ways that are cognizant of the context of the country is very important too. There's no question that our projects succeed much more often in countries that have stronger capacity and that have stronger policies and institutions, which maybe connects a little bit also to Indermit's point about budget support and policy-based reform. Yes, we need to scale up our investment and make sure that we're not funding consumption, and I fully agree on that point. But I think we also can't afford to ignore the critical importance of the policy and institutional environment in which we work, and the capacity the capacity to implement in countries. We can't take those as given. We need to see those as part of the equation, because if we implement projects in contexts where there isn't the capacity or the extra support to make them work, and where the policy environment is fundamentally, against the grain of the project, it's not going to succeed. So I think we have to look at it in a slightly more holistic way. But I agree that there's enormous potential to improve the implementation of projects in a given context, and to do that during the life of a project, not just learning from project to project and country to country.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. In fact, we had quite a few discussions about aggregating knowledge and how do we think about the different evidence that is coming in, and how do our clients read that knowledge, what they can extract from it. I think that's a very, very important point. And second, how we co-generate new knowledge. The model is not at all for people to generate knowledge for countries, but actually generate it with country, with our clients, learning by doing, and leaving a lot of capacity behind, both in terms of data systems and data analysis, and knowing how to run these field experiments and A/B testing. So comparing different ways of doing things so that we learn over time how to get better. So this is really the journey we are undertaking. I want to give Victoria another chance to contribute, but also tell our audience we are going to open up for a few questions. So if you have questions, please raise your hand and people will bring a mic your way.
Sure, thanks. And I really appreciated listening to Ed, Indermit, and Michael as well. And I agree with several of the things that have been said. Look, in terms of, so what next, and how do we really get this going? I think for us, it's really important to make sure that the evidence and the information that we already have, we're using it actively and fully. And I'm not so sure. I think that we have an opportunity with this effort that we're making to just really sit back and look if even in the areas or priority areas that we're working in, to say, what do we know, and are we really using the evidence? Because I think there is a lot of evidence on what works. And so I would start from there and challenge ourselves to make sure that we're making full use of what we know already and the information out there. And then I think, as has been said by other speakers, really getting into the impact evaluations that are in real time. And Ariana, in Oslo, I heard so many of the things that you know on some of the projects. So I'm really keen for us to be able to go forward with the plans to do, if not on all the projects, in some of the projects where there are some vital questions that we can ask. We know what we're doing, but there's some additional things that can be tested to see whether we're able to be more cost effective, or more impactful one way as opposed to another, because that gives us the basis for the adaptation to adapt. So that's the second thing. And then, as has been said, it's a capacity. I think here we have quite a few government colleagues here. We need to do more to bring this message about the importance of the relevance of learning, evidence through impact evaluations, including real time, to them. So it's really an owned agenda, a jointly owned, and then build capacity. I think capacity is so important. I understand that IG has a program that is being quite successful in building some of this capacity with clients. So working with both DIME and IEG, see how we can really move forward on the capacity agenda in countries. But let me stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, great, Victoria. Do we have questions from the audience? Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question. My name is Tina Gabre. I'm part of the World Bank education team. So my question refers to the difference in incentives between the academia research world and operation and policy making. So usually, I think that's a big challenge in people who are engaged in rigorous research in academia, especially the incentive and the standard is set in line with what's publishable. That requires a very clean design, fidelity with implementation, really controlled environment. Operations are nothing but that. The pressure is to go to scale immediately. Implementation can be very unpredictable and could change anytime projects get restructured and so on. So in this context, really moving forward, what is going to be the incentive to attract really rigorous research into operational research where it's really invisible, right? Because part of the issue is also client governments are not necessarily keen. They might be keen to the learning, but not necessarily to the evidence and the knowledge being published and being public. So in that context, when operational research is often messy, not visible, how do we really bridge that incentive gap, right? To bring research into the operational world. And also, I think in the next few days, maybe we will look at other methods of research, but the discussion so far has focused on RCTs, really clean, very good, rigorous research design. So in integrating learning in our operations, do we always go for the gold standard? But when we can't, should we be going to a silver or maybe even bronze standard of integrating learning? This is especially important for the components that are big, messy, bold. It's not going to be clean. So can we still do some learning there?
Thank you. We'll go to the next question. We'll take two more.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Mine is not a question, but to contribute something. As we are taking this agenda forward, I think I cannot agree more with Ed. What he has said is very fundamental that as we are thinking of making sure that the IE is being used as we are implementing the project, what is key is what are we doing at institutional level, at all levels. For example, organization change is very critical. Building the critical mass for readers in the digital age is very, very important. I mentioned something towards that in the morning, so I'll not repeat. But I just want to recommend that it is how we are capturing information products in terms of how we are going to use information. Sometimes the way we have packaged our information takes you a lot of time to read the documents. But you will see that you have situations whereby you can have 5-minute reads, 10-minute reads, 15-minute reads, things that can take you very little time, but you can understand what is going out there. And also, the generative AI is with us here. We cannot dismiss its availability. For example, even right now, somebody can be able to interact and collaborate with a chatbot, whether it's Jamin, to say what impact studies are there in this particular field, it will generate for you immediately. So these are things, these are just knowledges that we quickly just need to have. And of course, defining the learning agenda before we start the implementation. What is our learning agenda? These are just my contribution, not necessarily a question. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question right there.
Thank you for the great discussion. My question is related to scaling up of regional projects. For example, the Africa Centers of Excellence that has already, proven successful separately in West and Central Africa and East and Southern Africa. Is there scope for scaling up this project, further to make it a Pan-African project, or will that be like too large to manage across the continent?
So we're going to have a round of answers, and if we have time, we'll take another round of questions. So we have questions on academic incentives and the rigor of the work that we do in operations. And so I'm going to invite Michael to answer that question, but I want to contribute a view from our 20-year experience working with bank operations, which is that not at all have we given up the scientific rigor. And why we don't give up the scientific rigor? Because when we provide advice to a government, the difference between the right answer and the wrong answer is measured in the number of lives. We have such a high level of responsibility. When I started in 2004 in the Africa region, somebody told me that the Africa region could not afford the Rolls-Royce of scientific investigation. And my answer was, in 2004, as it is in 2024, if not in Africa, where? Where the needs are more dire, the questions and the answers have to be most relevant and most precise. So I think we have had an amazing collaboration with the Africa region all through these years, and we have created actionable results. Michael, to you.
Great. Thanks very much. I'll address this question. I also wanted to respond a bit to Ed, and really to clarify. I agree very much with your comments. I just wanted to clarify my previous comments to make that clear. I think one definitely needs to consider the policy and the institutional environment, and that's really going to affect the design of programs. Some of the, I think, why often the very reason, let me give a concrete example. If we're thinking about health, one of the great successes has been vaccination programs and basic maternal care programs. These are identifying things which are actually implementable, has led to, even in very low resource conditions, is what's enabled all of this health improvement that we've seen in basic lifespans. Or in education, understanding some of the institutional distortions. For example, education systems that are very influenced by aimed at elites and that are leave many children behind. That suggests that that's inspired much of the work on teaching at the right level. If you think about some of the results on difficulties that many teachers are having teaching, that's inspired the structured pedagogy approach with fairly with developing materials for teachers that provide a lot of scaffolding to and in some cases very detailed lesson guides that make their job easier and start with where the teachers are, and then supplementing that with coaching systems and other systems to take account of the weaknesses of the institutional of the low resources and institutional weaknesses that are prevalent, and obviously these do need to be adapted to particular country circumstances as well. And these need to be built in to be sustainable. I think it's good to take a creative approach to sustainability involving country governments, but also thinking about setting up other structures that might be needed. For example, on weather forecasting, there's tremendous, a lot of the systems that are being developed are actually open source. So it may be possible to develop software systems to adapt these open source artificial intelligence systems so it can be very easily used by an agriculture ministry, for example, to optimize sorry to be a bit technical here, but to optimize the loss function that's used to make the forecast particularly useful for, say, a maize farmer who needs to know when are the long rains coming and cares more about that than perhaps some other aspects of the weather. You can actually that's, you know, I'm getting a little bit. I take this with a grain of salt. I'm not an artificial intelligence expert, but my understanding is that's the sort of thing that should be possible fairly soon, and that so in addition to developing in this particular case, this may be improving the interface between the agriculture ministry and the full suite of tools are used to predict weather, rather than simply investing more in the meteorological department, although that's important too. Okay, let me turn to the education question. You know, I think this is a problem that in some ways is a bigger problem in theory than in practice. That might sound like a strange thing to say, but I'll give an example of working on some recent work I did that was working on in India with a state government that was trying to bring in digital education. So the government in that case was interested in a randomized evaluation, and I got involved. But soon after we got involved, we noticed that the basic data, so this was a digital education provider, was involved in providing tools for the state, and we noticed that the usage data on their platform suggested it was not being used very much. It was supposed to be used 40-minute sessions per week, but that wasn't actually happening. And in fact, very, very far from it. Well, you know, we were not brought in to analyze, to do a non-experimental basic monitoring exercise on the usage rates of the technology, but we realized that very quickly, and we transmitted that information to the state government, which then acted on it to try to address the situation. So when you read the papers, you see things that just focus on the regressions and on the statistical results, but in fact, there's often a lot of detailed work with policymakers and a lot of basic work to understand how the program is going that's involved. And in some ways, it's really a big failure of academics is that stuff doesn't get written up in the papers. Maybe we need some reform to academic institutions. So another point I would make is that some of the, do the policymakers, are they concerned about possible negative results? Now, the particular policymakers were very open, but I would note that even if they're not so open, they may be open to, in general, they may be open to A/B tests on the details of the program and how to improve it. And there's a lot of this, after all, was a digital technology. So you could very quickly do things like it should be possible to look at different variants of the program, different problems that are shown to students, different instructions, and look at which ones seem more effective in raising test scores. That's very useful, even if we leave aside the politically difficult question of what's the overall return to the technology, and that's something that gives a very short run improvement, potentially very rapid turnaround improvement in the quality of the project. So I think in looking for in looking for opportunities like that, it may also be possible to address some of the political constraints as well. In general, I think we need to bring a whole suite of types of knowledge, whether that's experimental evidence, not descriptive evidence, non-experimental evidence. We need to bring a range of evidence and economic theory and other types of knowledge, scientific knowledge, to the development, not just the experimental approach. But I think the experimental approach can often be very useful.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And in fact, I mean, your points are very, very well taken. We like to inspire and move the agenda, look forward to improvements. Do we care where we are today? Sure we do. But we care much more about where we're going tomorrow. And so kind of learning how to get better is really at the heart of this. Intermit, perhaps you can discuss the question on, are we scaling up learning across the region and the experience that we're having so far with the World Bank Institute and your vision of moving that forward. I think this type of programs will be amazing in, bringing knowledge and learning by doing, but the the World Bank, Institute will, it's the history. We are too old, we know about old things.
Okay.
Yes,
No,
how
actually-
does that will affect our ability to converse with think tanks and universities all over the world?
So I actually was struck by the young lady who said, can we scale this up Africa-wide and so on? And the answer is that we should. And I think that the best way to do that is to make this workshop a successful one. And by the way, so I feel that the way to make this workshop a successful one is to actually help all of the country teams, all of the project teams that are there, to the extent that they want, to the extent that they want to actually, to the extent that they want to get support from DEC, that they should get it. Okay. If this means more money for you, Ariana, we will talk about more money for you. That can come from us, that can come from Victoria, that can come from Ed. You know, normally speaking, so I found in my 25 years at the World Bank, good ideas always get funded. Some really bad ones do too, but good ideas always do. Okay, so I think this is a good idea. Now, there's one issue that I do want to take up with you, Ariana. So I agreed with everything that you said, other than you said something about most rigorous or most. So I would replace that most rigorous part with more rigorous. Okay, so in the sense that, I think that the role of the development impact group is to be a partner with academics, but also to be a partner with practitioners. So in a sense, you have the role of a double agent in a good way, not in a bad way, in the sense that you have to be brokering, you have to be an intelligent broker of the kind of work that people like, the kind of work that folks at JPAL and all do and so on. And you have to work with people like Michael, who I think he's at a stage where he would like to see his ideas being applied, and he would like to see his ideas actually be taken to scale and to improve the lives of people around things, right? So I think that you have to sort of, to the extent that you have to be good at, to the extent that you have to be rigorous in your craft, it is only to be, it is only to be a good broker. It's only to be a credible broker, to be credible both to folks like Michael and Esther Duflo and others, but also to be credible to the practitioners. If you say, look, it can only be a randomized controlled trial, etc., then you're not a credible broker. Okay, so you have to find a way to make sure that the main insights of people like Michael and so on get traction in the countries. I'm sure Michael agrees with this, but so don't ask him to do your job, right? but you should not try to do his job either, you know. So I think that you have a very nice role as the development impact group in the bank, and you should embrace that role. And by that, I mean you have to be flexible about what exactly you are what exactly you are recommending, as long as it conforms to the basic principles that people like Michael and others have enunciated. So just
Thank you,
one
Indermit.
disagreement. It was not most rigorous, it's just more rigorous. That's all. Yeah.
I wish, Indermit, you were here in this room with all these discussions with policymakers and researchers and operations of the bank. And that's exactly what is happening, right? Trying to put the questions first and understanding how do we answer those important questions. I'm going to deflect and pass it on to Victoria.
Just very quickly on the ACE project. Yes, it's had good results, good impact. I think the challenge that we're really facing is a constraint on IDA. You know, so how do you, if there are things that you want to scale up in a constrained funding environment, which one do you scale up? You know, do you do the ACE or do you do something on the energy that we're scaling up? Those are the things we're grappling with. So it's not because we don't want to scale up. Yes, it's a potential, but we have to find the funding. Yeah.
So we have time for 3 more questions. We're going to take the question here, there, and I saw another one.
Thank you very much. My name is Yabei Zhang. I'm with the Rwanda Energy project. I want to reflect a little bit about from the country project implementation experience, because I think many resonate with points that mentioned earlier. And Victoria mentioned that for the our region, that the successful projects rate is about 30%. And I think that in Rwanda, we should be very proud that for one project, RESSP, Rwanda Electricity Sector Reform project was rated as highly satisfactory last year. And I think it's probably less than 5%. And I wrote by the way, I wrote the ICR Implementation Commission report. So I have first experience to reflect, okay, what worked at the country level, at the project implementation level. I want to categorize that into the 3 M. 1 M is mindset. It's basically the commitment. Whether we believe we can achieve the results, whether the political commitment there and the fully ownership of the government. I think they make huge difference from the start of the project design to implementation. And the second M is the motivation, because I think it's from the client side to the team side. Okay, what motivates we do the work? And in Rwanda, I again commend the government to have this accountability system. There are KPIs. Often when we talk about our clients, oh, okay, this disbursement, this number of targets, it's part of my KPI. So again, that makes a huge difference in terms of implementation. And the third M is methods. And really about what we talked about today, the learning from other sectors, learning from other countries' projects, and learning by doing, and continued adaptive learning. And that also reflected the overall Rwanda Energy Program, because that was the project completed in 2022, and we also have a follow-up project and the energy equip project, and now at the Ascent Rwanda project to scale up the success. So I think that method, that continued learning really also make a difference. So that's my comments, reflection, and my question is from the impact evaluation side. Do we have approach to capture all those key elements? Because I think some it's easy to quantify, some is hard. Because when we think about the mindset, the commitments, the motivation, that's often the key drivers to make a project successful and to achieve impacts. And can we how can we really quantify and really show the evidence for other countries, other teams to learn? Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, that's a comment to our counterpart. I think I also did often that talk to Martin from the Ministry of Infrastructure and to say they really need to be proud. And because that it's a really successful story for electricity access, that in 2005-6, the access rate was only about 6%. Now it's over 75%. So you can see the huge improvement.
Let's take two more. Please keep your comments short so we have time to answer for them. We cannot hear you.
We should be investing in, we should make our expenditures an investment and not in consumption. But many a times we know that this distinction is quite blurred. For instance, in the case of cash transfers, safety nets, or even programs for consumption subsidies for water, or even chlorination, some kind of support for maintaining water quality and so on and so forth, you have a consumption element coming in here. So I would say, I think this is a little blurred, but I would like to know your thinking on this. Thanks.
Hi. Hi there. Thanks very much for all the presentations. I just had a question about whether it would be possible to have some kind of, or whether it already exists, some kind of a guidance, short guidance note of some kind, which enabled TTLs to kind of map more directly the point that they're in the operation and where an impact evaluation could kind of come in. Because I think that sometimes they know where it would be great to implement an impact evaluation, but there's a lot of frictions in between that sort of intention and actually being able to put it into their projects. So whether it's, you know, at the different stages, whether it's the MTR or even in the project preparation stage, whether it would be possible to provide some kind of short guidance around that. That means they don't have to understand all the intricacies of an impact evaluation, but they can at least have a sort of signpost to where it would be possible to start working with researchers from DIME or your team. Thanks.
Yeah, great, thank you. So on the 3 M's, I should say this is why Victoria is here. Mind and motivation and learning. Really, the whole idea of this program is to incite motivation and learning and having the right mindset towards discovery, figuring it out, and really not be judged by where we start, but where we're going. And so kind of connects very well to this last question, because we want to incentivize where, you know, the difference between now and then. You know, kind of taking advantage of the fact that we will improve, not judging by where we are, but really judging by how much evidence we generate, how much evidence we bring in, how much better our designs will be. And to that effect, we have asked the teams to record where you're starting in your project design, where you're going to be by the end of this week. And over time, we will ask you to report back on the progress you're making in generating the learning or incorporating the learning and seeing how far we go. Why are we doing that? Because this is really understanding the value added of these learning opportunities and kind of recording how much better we are doing over time. This is not, again, about judging anyone for whether or not they are effective today, but it's whether or not they are learning how to ask the right questions, getting the right answers, and acting on those answers. I think that's really what is exciting and motivating. I think there is a question for Indermit out there that I'm going to pass on to him, but anyone else who wants to have a last thought on this panel, please raise your hand or unmute your mic.
So I'm very sorry, I did not hear the question because I'm an idiot. That's sorry.
All of a sudden I forgot the question. Oh, yes. So Indermit, you made a point that we should not finance public consumption, but finance investment. And George was drawing, we're asking whether there is a thin line between them, especially when we are financing people's consumption but for the purpose of investing in their productive capabilities.
I wasn't saying that we shouldn't do budget support. I do believe that I think that a great thing about the World Bank's financing instruments is that we have things like budget support, we have investment projects, we have guarantees, and so on. I think the fact that we bring that whole array of projects is actually a very good thing. I'm just saying that there are countries in which, especially the more difficult countries, so I actually agree with Ed that you can't sort of go too far to the side that the country doesn't matter at all. What I'm really saying is that based on the conditions in the country, you should actually be matching instrument to the conditions far more strategically or far better. And there are some countries in which you should be doing more budget support depending on the time and place and so on. But there are also countries in which you should not be doing nearly as much of those things, I think, because, based on a quick retrospective of, let's say, a country like Pakistan, I think that what has happened in Pakistan is that over time we have gone too far towards budget support and too far away from investment projects, So I can think of other countries like this. I can also think of other countries. So I can't think of too many countries where we are not doing enough budget support and we are doing too much investment projects. I can't think of too many of those. Yeah.
So we are out of time, but I'm going to give Ed and Michael the last concluding line.
Maybe just on my side to say this has been a really stimulating conversation, and I think there's a huge degree of agreement amongst all of us about the importance of scaling up impact evaluation, of maintaining and building rigor in the approaches that we take, in finding ways to build that back into our operations. I think there's broad agreement that impact requires that we focus on quality in our projects, and that impact evaluation both within a project to help improve the implementation of that project, and I think also learning horizontally across projects and over time can really help us strengthen the quality. I think impact also requires other things. It requires scale, it requires speed, and it requires also enabling policies and institutions and capacities to make it work and to sustain it. And so I know Indermit and Michael clearly fully get that as well. And I think, yes, there are some areas like vaccines and immunizations that can really move the needle, but we saw during the COVID pandemic how even doing something like getting COVID vaccines to people and into people's arms in some parts of the world is very challenging because of limited capacity and institutions, and so tackling that, I think, is part of not just making sure projects are implemented successfully, but also that they're sustainable. And then lastly, I'd just say on the very interesting question about, is it the gold standard or the silver standard or the bronze standard? I think we don't want to lose rigor, as you say, Ariana. If we just do it in a slapdash way, we may get the wrong answer and lives are on the line. But I also think that building capacity for impact evaluation in Africa and around the world has to be part of the solution. It can't possibly be you and Michael and Indamit doing all of the impact evaluations. So somehow we've got to, I think, work out what's good quality that's high enough but fit for purpose, and recognizing that we need to empower people to try to do impact evaluation, to learn to do it, and to build their capacity to do it. And I think the question about how do we make incentives for that, I think the incentives can't be publication in top tier journals. That we have to have a way of making sure that people can be incentivized within the World Bank Group and within countries, governments and other development actors to take this seriously beyond just sort of publication.
Thank you, Ed. And Michael?
I just wanted to reply to the question about when to start thinking about evaluation and when to put those in. Some cases there'll be political pressure to roll out things very quickly, and this won't be feasible. But in some cases, there'll be debates within the project team, often debates within the head of individuals about what sound like the details of ways to arrange projects. And I think one thing that can be very useful is to three things. First, try to learn from the existing evidence. That's something, there's a lot of evidence out there now, and we can learn from that, including evidence, as Indamit says, on what works. Second, try to pilot things. And if those pilots are, it's possible to learn from those pilots without even if there's not a randomized evaluation, it's possible to learn from those pilots and to learn at small scale before things, some basic things that aren't working, as in the example I gave before, if the software wasn't being used, given the incentives of the teachers in the education system. If you can structure those, and sometimes there will be opportunities to do so. So you select the pilot areas randomly, then I think you'll learn more from the pilot than you would otherwise. And I think in some cases, randomly within whatever constraints the political environment creates. But then, to come back to the question, people will be wondering, the project designers will be wondering, should we go route A? Should we go route B? They may be genuinely open about that. If it's possible to structure in the early phases as part of the piloting a test to just compare route A and route B in what may sound like small details of the project, often those can have very big impacts. And if you get, you can also get external views on this and views of various stakeholders, whether it's people from the field, whether it's people with experience internationally in these programs, and they may suggest some ideas, and the policymakers may say, hey, let's try some of those out as well. And that offers an opportunity to learn ideally in the pilot phase of a project to feed into the later stages of nationwide rollout. Not possible in every case, but where possible, it can be very useful.
Thank you, Michael. I want to thank all the panelists and for this incredible discussion. And here's some concluding thought from Victoria.
I just had a quick intervention before Victoria. So I wanted to say that I just got a picture of the hall, and it is stunning. I am absolutely stunned by the thing, and I'm also really sad that I couldn't be there. And I'm very grateful to Victoria, both for actually being a big supporter of this initiative and also for representing me. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you, Indamit. And, it's going to cost you, so just get ready. Anyway, look, we've run out of time. I wanted to say thank you to everybody, but also really to urge our government colleagues here to really be the champions of this new approach, or this stepped up approach, bringing learning, evidence, adapting to evidence as it comes in the work that we do together. You're here, you're spending a week here, stimulating conversations, learning things that work and so on. Please, we count on you to help us be the voice for this on the other side, you know, because I think there's still a lot of skepticism and there's a sense it costs too much money, we can't do this, maybe we're in a hurry. So we're counting on you and look forward to really working in partnership with you to be successful. But thank you.